Okay, so 9.1 deals with circles and parabolas, and this is the first lecture of what are called conic sections. So we should probably just take a quick look at what conic sections are. So if you take a cone and you put it tip to tip here and you make a cut through one of them, you'll notice that it would leave this parabolic curve. So if you could picture doing this in clay, it would have a parabola curve right there. If you do it parallel to the base, so you make a cut through that, you would parallel to that circle base, you're going to have a circle in the clay here. An ellipse is when you angle it through. So you angle it through the cone and you get this elliptical shape. And a hyperbola is when you do it vertically kind of through both cones. You get kind of a parabola shape on that one and kind of a parabola shape on that one. So there are all kinds of different pictures of parabolas. So if you just Google it, you might find one that makes more sense, maybe something like this, but here we go. Okay, so circles and parabolas, we'll concentrate on those today. So I'm going to break this up into two parts. So we looked at some of the conic sections, and basically it's just like all of this stuff, and some parts are there and some parts aren't. So here's the definition of a circle. Here's the standard form of a circle. Kind of looks like the distance formula. This is what it would look like if the center were at 0, 0. So let's just jump into it. This should be reviewed from Algebra 2. If somebody gave me this standard form, we do the opposite of what's in parentheses. So my center will be -2, 3, and the radius ends up being the square root of 16 because this is r squared. So the radius is 4. So I'm going to go 2 to the left, down, up 3, and put my center. And then I would go up 4 and put a dot, left 4, put a dot, right 4, right 4, and then down 4. And I'm going to try to draw the best circle I can. So I can see where the center is, and then all these spots would be, this one would be -2, 7. This one would be -2, -1. This one would be 2, 3. And this one over here would be -6, 3. So you could label the up, down, left, and right. And remember, the center is already labeled off to the side, -2, 3. Okay, so the next one is a DIY. So go ahead and look at this circle and try to write the equation. Pause the video now. All right, so if you try to write it, you should have found the center, and then you do the opposite in the parentheses, and then find the radius and square it. So that's going to look like the center was at 6, -6. So I write x minus 6 quantity squared, y minus a -6, so that's why it's +6 squared. And then you're finding that the radius is 3. If the radius is 3, you write r squared is 9. So now they say the point 1, -2 is on a circle whose center is -3, 5. So what's happening is you have a circle with the center and a point on the circle. We're supposed to write the standard form. So you have to have the standard form at the end. Well, I already know we have x plus 3, y plus 5 quantity squared. The only thing I need is what is my r, and then we're going to square it. Well, that's the distance between these 2 points. So I can do the distance formula. I could do 1 minus -3 quantity squared plus -2 minus -5 quantity squared. And I'm getting 4 squared is 16. And negative 2 plus 5 is 3, squared is 9. So I'm getting the square root of 25 or 5. So this would be 25 over here. Now another way to do this, just doing the distance formula, another way is to just set up your equation. Is to just set up x minus, I guess, h plus y minus k equals r squared. So now you know x is the solution point. So this would be x and y. This is h and k. So x is 1 minus negative 3 quantity squared. Y is negative 2, the solution point. K is the negative 5 from the center. And it's the same thing. You're going to end up with 4 squared, which is 16, 3 squared, which is 9, and so you end up with r squared is 25. But the key is, at the very end of the problem, don't just find the radius. It says write the standard form. All right, so go ahead. Now you're doing a diameter of the endpoints of the diameter at these 2 points. So how would you go about doing that? Pause the video now. Okay, so if the endpoints of the diameter, that means the center, so the center will be the midpoint of that line. So go ahead and do the midpoint formula. You should have got negative 2 and 1. Because that's the center, those will be the h and the k. So you'll put those in. That you always say x minus the center x and y minus the center y. Now for your x and y, pick either one of those. I just picked the 3 and negative 5, so I put the 3 in for x and the negative 5 in for y. So when you do that, you get 5 squared. And when you do this, you get negative 4 squared and 25 and 16. What happened here? So 3 minus negative 2 would be 5. Negative 5 minus 1. So this should have ended up as negative 6. So that's 36, and 25 will be 61, so this will be 61 over here. All right, so what if we're given an equation with this form? I believe this is supposed to be, negative 6. So what we're going to do is what's called completing the square. We did this a couple chapters ago. So I'm going to look at these two terms, and I'm going to factor a 6 away from the x squared and a 6 away from the 12. So 12 divided by 6 is 2. I'm going to put some new number there. I'll work with the y's now, so I'm going to pull a 6 away from the y, so that's y squared. And negative 24 divided by 6 is negative 4. And then remember that negative 6 is going over to this side as a 6, I believe. I'll figure it out in a second. So with the red numbers, I'm going to take this 2 and divide by 2, and I get 1. When I square that, I get 1. Now remember, when I put a 1 here, on the dotted line is 6. So I've changed the problem by 6, but I'm not working on one side of the equation. I'm working on both sides of the equation. So now I'm going to put a 6 over here. If you do something to one side, you do it to both. So then on the green numbers, I take the negative 4, I divide by 2, and I get negative 2. Now when I square that one, I get a 4. So I'm going to add 4, but also on the dotted line, I have 24. So I add 24 on that side. I'm working on both sides. So if you do something to one side, you do it to both sides. So the red numbers go like this, x. Now remember, this number right here, plus 1, goes in parentheses. And again, I have a 6, and I have y minus 2, that number right there, that gets squared on the outside. And I was correct. This should have been a 6, so this adds up to adds up to 36. Now the final thing is to divide every term by 6 because there's nothing in front of the parentheses. So it's x plus 1 quantity squared, y minus 2 quantity squared is equal to 6. So what you have is a circle with center, negative 1, 2, and this time the radius is the square root of 6. So that's the first time. So that's the end of part 1, and we'll move on to part 2 with the next video.